What up, y'all? Welcome to another special episode of Indy-Analysis. Today, we're talking about the Portland Trailblazers. I'm your co-host, Jonathan Frid.
And I am Alan J. Apandian, and today we got special guest Dr. Jon Young, big fan of the Portland Trailblazers.
What's up, boys?
How are you doing, sir?
Great. Thanks for having me on. I got to admit, this is my first podcast with CBCA students, man.
Hey, we're making history. I like it.
I love it.
The pleasure's ours. And Dr. Young is a big Portland fan. You grew up in the Portland area, is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. First 18 years of my life. So grew up going to Blazers games. Just a big fan of. These guys are probably too old, but like guys like Clyde Drexler, Kevin Duckworth, Buck Williams, and then even as I got older, guys that you may be aware of, like the Brandon Roy, of course, the Greg Oden year. This tragedy there as a Portland fan.
Yeah. Well, today we're going to talk about some different tragedies. No, that was a joke.
Nice.
That was a joke. But I'll pass it back to Frid. Let's just get started. Let's kick them right in.
So I say we just keep going with what we're doing. Like, let's go with the way we've been trending. The Portland Trailblazers. I'm not going to say that they had a successful season last year because I don't want to be lying to our fans. Sitting at a record of 27-55, which is well below 500. Dr. Young, I'm sorry if I'm sorry.
That hurts That hurts.
Coached by an NBA champion, Hall of Famer, Chauncey Billups. So this is what their starting roster is looking like. So this is not including Damian Lillard, by the way. Obviously, Damian Lillard is their star, the bright spot, but he was injured a lot last year, so this is not including him. So you got Anthony Simons or Simmons. I think it's Simons.
Simons.
Yeah. Simons. Anthony Simons, a dynamic young guard. He's actually showing a lot of promise. We'll get to that. And then Ben McLemore, and then Josh Hart at the 3, and then Justice Winslow and Joseph Nurkic at the 4 and 5. And then off the bench, you got people like Brandon Williams, Nasir Little, and Drew Eubanks. And a very, should I say, special bright spot for the Portland Trailblazers would be their recent pickup in the NBA draft, Shaedon Sharpe. Alan, talk about Shaedon Sharpe, because you had some high praise for him the other day.
Yeah, so if you look back to a few of our other episodes, I definitely do praise Shaedon Sharpe a lot. I think he's going to be a really good player, like 6'6", 6'5" guard who can score the ball in a variety of ways, great ball handler. Though we don't have a lot of college film on him, from his AAU highlights and his semi-pro highlights, he definitely looks to be a really promising prospect for Portland.
Yeah.
So looking at the Trailblazers, like their on-court kind of performance, they obviously, like Frid said, they weren't the best team in the league, and a lot of that had to do with Damian Lillard missing a lot of time. They were bottom 3 in the league in most of the categories, but looking at their roster, they have such young players like Anthony Simons, CJ Alby, Nasir Little, Keon Johnson, and Josh Hart, who average nearly 20 points a game. So they had such young players who were trying to create offense, which is not their primary role, and that led to a lot of poor kind of stats. But in the other sense, they did find Anthony Simons to be a really good role player who can definitely complement Damian Lillard in the future. And before we move on to like the offseason talk or anything, I wanted to mention the CJ Mccollum trade that happened middle of the season last year. And I'll pass it to Dr. Young. Obviously, with Damian Lillard being injured and him not playing particularly well last season, how do you think the CJ Mccollum trade affected them last season? How do you think it'll affect them this season?
Yeah, that's a great question. I told these guys before we got started that the perspective I'm bringing today is from that of a fan, just growing up and loving the Blazers. In fact, even taking some students last year out to a game.
Yeah.
So them finishing 13th in the West actually is just a bad secret that they were trying to tank. And so shutting people down, injuries for stub toes and hurt feelings would find you some time on the bench. They were disappointed. I know Portland fans were disappointed that they ended up with the 7th overall pick. I think they were hoping for a little higher draft pick to kind of get some relief for some awful basketball that Portland fans had to endure last year. But specific to the CJ Mccollum trade, that was a hard one. As a fan, we grew up with CJ. He was a draft pick of the Blazers. Him and Dame just had some awesome time together. It took us to the Western Conference Finals a few years ago. But I think fans in Portland felt like that duo had kind of run its course. Like we had watched that over and over and over again, watched those two eventually come up against teams that were bigger, stronger guards that just beat up on Dame and CJ. And so as hard as it was as a fan, I think a majority of Portland fans felt like it was time, and if we had to choose between Dame and CJ, Dame's been a ride or die in Portland. And so It was hard to see CJ go. I think a lot of fans were hoping we would have gotten a little bit more in that trade. But at the end of the day, CJ wasn't an all-star. And so I think Portland fans, again, were probably a little disappointed with the return they got on that trade specifically.
CJ McCollum, he's doing well in New Orleans, but I agree with Dr. Young. He had run his course. Him and Dame as a duo, they run their course as they were not great defensively. And with Dame missing a significant time and the Trailblazers looking to go into kind of rebuild/buying mode, it looked like CJ was definitely going to be moved at some point, and he did last season. So that I'm going to pass it to Frid, and we can transition to the offseason talk.
So some notable offseason trades. Actually, Portland's been a little active in this offseason. Not a whole lot, but a little bit. So they some re-signings went on. Re-signed their starting center with Jusuf Nurkic, and then re-signing their dynamic young guard Anthony Simons. And then they also extended Damian Lillard. Good move. Portland, if you're listening, don't let him leave. Okay, he's pretty good. You're gonna want to keep him.
Pretty good.
He's decent. He's decent.
That's free knowledge. You can do what you want with that.
There you go.
And then they signed some players. For example, a reigning NBA champion and Gary Payton II. Gary Payton II really, before last season, was borderline irrelevant. Kind of no one knew who he was and played like bench minutes for sure. And then really came into his own last season, becoming definitely one of the most athletic, one of the most best, like one of the biggest defensive-minded guards in the league in a very successful Golden State team. And he, like it or not, he was a pretty big size piece in that championship run. So that's a pretty good pickup for Portland, especially considering that they were literally 30th in defensive rating last year, like 30th. Like there's only 30 teams in the NBA. That means they were dead last. So picking up one of like the best defensive guards in the league, that's definitely a good move by them.
Yeah, for sure. And going back to extending Damian Lillard, they gave him a 2-year, $122 million extension, meaning that he's going to make over $60 million in the 2025 and the 2026. And
that is crazy.
So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Dr. Young. Dr. Young, with all these moves, we can start with Dame. You can start whatever you want. With all these moves, what do you think? How will it affect the Blazers winning in that sense?
Yeah, no, it's good. Couple thoughts. First of all, you guys have been NBA fans for a while, and so you know that sometimes when teams go into rebuild mode, they can stay there for 5, 6, 7 years, and it's just year after year tanking for draft picks. And so I think fans in Portland are excited that it feels like this is going to be a quick rebuild. In that some of these signings, I think Portland fans are pretty excited about. So the obvious one is Dame. He's the heart and soul of the Trailblazers. Portland loves him. They've embraced Dame Dollar. You're walking down Portland, you'll see people doing this. And
Dame time.
That's right. Commercials, in the Portland TV market, they show the shots that he's hit in those big moments in the playoffs. And Dame is a legend, will go down as one of the best Portland Trailblazers ever. And so to re-sign him and take care of him, really in an era where stars are hopping from team to team and ring chasing, for Dame to stay loyal in a small market like Portland, where some people maybe have a little bit of inferiority complex. We're not LA, we're not some of these big, cities. And so for someone to choose Portland, we love it. We embrace it. We just love that loyalty. That's so uncommon nowadays in the NBA. So we're excited to have Dame. A few underrated signings. I think GP2 is going to be huge. You mentioned his defense. The defense of the Blazers was awful. Guys just going at Dame and CJ all day long. And so to have a defender like Gary Payton, who obviously comes from pretty good genes. His dad was a pretty good defender, Hall of Famer. Yeah. And so on the ball defense for a guard, to pick up someone like that, I think is going to be a huge pickup for the Blazers defensively. Another small kind of backstory is that Gary Payton II played his college ball right down the road at Oregon State University. And so a lot of people out in Oregon and the Portland area specifically are kind of excited about that story. The feel-good story doesn't help you win any more games, but it does sometimes get more people in the stands. And so I think people are excited about that signing. And then the biggest one, you guys touched on really briefly, but Jeremy Grant. I mean, guy averages 20 points a game for the Pistons. Just someone to help shoulder the load for Dame, I think is going to be huge, where it's crazy to think, but as Dame gets older, he's going to need someone to help. And I think Jeremy Grant can be that scorer, along with some of the bright spots we saw from Simons. And so I'm excited about it. I'm still not ready to drink the Kool-Aid that these guys are contenders in the West, which is loaded. Although with the Jazz seeming to trade away the farm with Mitchell coming back to Ohio, that might be one team. That might be one team the Blazers can catch in the West. But I still think the West is loaded, and the Blazers are going to struggle to really make it into the top half of the Western Conference standings.
Yeah, so with Jeremy Grant, the Blazers got him for virtually nothing. They gave up a rookie player, I think. They drafted him this year. They gave him up with first-round pick and a second-round pick for 2025. So they didn't really give up a lot for Jeremy Grant. And Jeremy Grant, like you said, 20-point-per-game scorer for the Pistons. And he's a good defender, which will help on the defensive side of the ball. And he's a very versatile player who can definitely help shoulder the offensive and defensive load from Damian Lillard. So great point there.
Another point we didn't talk about, which if I'm as a former basketball coach, just kind of guessing what's going to be the difference in the Blazers this upcoming season, it's really something that not many people are talking about, and that is how engaged is Nurkic. And so Nurkic, most NBA fans wouldn't know a whole lot about him. He probably is going to give you 14 to 16 a night. He's a big 7-footer, can shoot the three, is not super athletic, but kind of an under the radar story is how engaged and involved he's going to be. And so he seems to have one of those personalities. You guys have seen it as players that can be kind of temperamental, and when he's in, he's all in. But when he's just kind of going through the motions, he's kind of injury prone. And if he's out, I think they're going to struggle. There's not a ton of size with the Blazers. And so the guards are great. They're going to be tough, but there is talks of them having to go small potentially if Nurkic is kind of going through the motions. So that'll be an interesting storyline for fans to keep an eye on.
Yeah,
for sure.
That's true.
Yes. And I think with Jeremy Grant, you can definitely slide him down to the 5, slide Josh Hart down to the 4, and start maybe like a Shaedon Sharpe or a CJ Elleby and a Nazir Little. I think that would be a pretty good lineup for them.
That's another small ball action.
Interesting point to watch is Jabari Walker. It's their second-round draft pick, and he killed it this summer on the Blazers Summer League team that happened to win the Summer League championship. And so he was the second to last pick in the draft. So one more guy picked after him. And I was listening to a podcast just the other day. He's got just a big chip on his shoulder and has the teams that passed him up, written on the wall at his house, and just out for blood. And he played his college ball at Colorado, but had a great summer, was a good shooter, a great defender, one of the best rebounders all summer. I think he led the Pac-12 in rebounding last year at Colorado. And so he's another player to keep an eye on. I know Summer League doesn't always translate to, the regular season, but certainly there's some glimpses there of promise.
Yeah, for sure. So
good mentality to have in the league, for sure.
Yeah, 100%. So that just about does it for the Portland episode. We want to thank Dr. Young for hopping on with us.
Yeah.
You're always welcome on here. It's definitely a pleasure for us to have a person of your stature definitely hop on with us, some amateur professionals.
Happy to do it, man. Love what you guys are up to, and can't wait to see where this thing goes.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I'll pass it back to Frid. Frid, you got something?
Well, I just want to say thank you so much to Alan wearing an appropriate Lakers T-shirt to the Portland Trailblazers episode. Very, very appropriate. That's good job. Just had to say that. Talking about the Blazers, they're in 2 different states. Whatever. We're past it. We're past it. So, real quick, let me shout out the gram, shall I, Alan? How does that sound? Dr. Young, we okay with that?
Let's do it.
Everyone go on Instagram, or if you're feeling really extra, if you're really bored, hop on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. On Apple Podcasts / Spotify, it's Alan. Correct me if I'm wrong. Look up the P&R Pod.
Yeah, that's correct.
No capitals, no spaces. The P&R Pod. Boom, you'll find us right there. And also on Instagram, just go give us a follow. We're dropping some new reels. It's a good time. Follow the Pick and Roll Podcast _.
That's a wrap.
That's a